Afternoon. The Committee on Homeland Security Subcommittee on Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Protection and the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform Subcommittee on Information Technology will come to order. The subcommittees are jointly meeting today to receive testimony regarding the Department of Homeland Security's Continuous Diagnostics and Monitoring Program. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. This is the second hearing this year that the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Protection Subcommittee has held on the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation, or CDM, program. And that's because I see real value in the goals of CDM, not only for cybersecurity, but also for improving the efficiency of information technology across the board. To that end, I'm pleased to be holding this hearing today jointly with my good friend from Texas, Congressman Will Hurd, who will be joining us shortly, and who has been a leader on IT modernization issues as the chairman of the Subcommittee on Information Technology. We welcome our friends from the Oversight Committee to the CDM conversation today. I believe that DHS's CDM program has great potential to drive progress on a number of cybersecurity issues, from network visibility to data-centric security, and from the role of increased automation of security tasks to the role of artificial intelligence. So the question that I have for this panel today is, what can Congress do to make sure CDM capabilities are being rolled out to keep pace with the evolving threat landscape? The government has a pretty checkered past when it comes to IT investments and the ability of federal agencies to provide effective cybersecurity. And while CIOs are the point of accountability on all things IT at their respective agencies, every stakeholder has to recognize their role in supporting CIOs. But this is a hearing about finding solutions and ensuring that the federal government is on the right track. I think every agency represented today has some IT investment or application that did not produce the kind of results the American people, the American public needs and deserves from their taxpayer dollars. And that is not to mention the profoundly damaging data breaches that have plagued federal agencies. We simply have to get a handle on the cyber threats we are facing, and I believe that CDM is part of that solution. This hearing is about learning from the initial rollout and progress of CDM Phase 1, plans to move through Phase 2, and perhaps most importantly, what is and what should be the long-term vision of CDM. Obviously, part of today's hearing will involve a discussion about the resources necessary to invest in top-of-the-line security technologies. But at its core, cybersecurity is more than an issue of technology. It is an issue of governance, of process, and leadership. We have to get the strategies and vision for CDM right, so that our investments don't throw good money after bad. To that end, I intend today's hearing to include a robust conversation about the metrics necessary to measure not only the implementation of CDM, but also the effectiveness of the program as well. CDM is about maintaining more secure systems and a better understanding of the risk posture of the federal enterprise. But it also represents a continuing mission and establishes the kind of structure necessary for us to evolve. To that end, I welcome your thoughts, not only about the CDM capabilities, but also about the ultimate goal of providing network and system defenders with the data and tools necessary to do their jobs well and at the pace to combat the threats that they face. What is CDM's value add to the people on the lines of this conversation? It is the federal agency CIOs that are ultimately accountable for bad investments or data breaches. So this is really about getting you the authorities, tools, and resources that you need to get the job done. As we continue this conversation, I look forward to hearing from stakeholders as we did at last month's hearing, as we will continue to make sure that we are getting CDM right. CDM is an ambitious program that I believe has the framework of providing the kind of cybersecurity that the American people deserve from a government that they entrust with their most valuable, personal, and in some cases, irreplaceable information. I want to thank the witnesses for their time, and I look forward to your testimony today. Other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. We are pleased to have a distinguished panel of witnesses before us today on this very important topic. Mr. Max Everett is the Chief Information Officer for the Department of Energy. Mr. Everett held a variety of information technology leadership positions in government and the private sector before joining DOE in June of 2017. We certainly look forward to your perspectives today, sir. Mr. Scott Blackburn is the executive in charge of the VA's Office of Information and Technology and has served in that capacity since October of 2017. Prior to joining the VA, Mr. Blackburn served in the Army until 2003. Thank you for that service as well, sir, and thanks for being here. Mr. David Garcia is the Chief Information Officer for the Office of Personnel Management. Mr. Garcia previously served as the Chief Information Officer for the state of Maryland. Sir, thank you for being here with us today. And finally, Mr. Kevin Cox is the Program Manager for CDM in the National Protection and Programs Directorate at the Department of Homeland Security. Before joining DHS, Mr. Cox was the Deputy Chief Information Security Officer at the Department of Justice. We look forward to gaining your insights on your interagency experiences. I now
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I serve as the vice-ranking member of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee. In the absence of Mr. Cummings, I do have an opening statement I would like to read.
Oh, I'll recognize the gentleman for his opening statement.
I thank the Chairman for his courtesy. And I want to thank you and Chairman Hurd for holding today's hearing to examine the status of the Department of Homeland Security's Continuous Diagnostics Mitigation Program. Initiated in 2013, the Department of Homeland Security, by the Department of Homeland Security, the CDM program provides other federal agencies hardware, software, and services through contracting vehicles to strengthen the security of federal networks, and as you indicated, Mr. Chairman, desperately needed. CDM has great potential to help agencies secure networks by providing data to agencies on their attack surface, who have access to their networks, and how users access those networks. This will eventually allow agencies to monitor their traffic and network activities and identify areas of concern. Just this week, we were reminded, albeit in the private sector, of additional Russian attacks on our grid. And so we know the threat is real. However, the lack of adequate funding for CDM has impeded full deployment of the program. The President's budget for fiscal year 2019 requested $237 million for the CDM program as part of an $815 million request for cybersecurity funding at DHS. As in previous years, the $237 million is not just for DHS to oversee the procurement and operations associated with CDM, but also for individual agencies to implement activities related to the program. And so it gets dispersed pretty quickly. When funding from DHS does not completely cover the cost to agencies implementing CDM, agencies are left to find funding among other information technology priorities. However, at a time when so much of federal IT spending is simply to operate and maintain legacy systems, it will continue to be a challenge for agencies to find the money for net new investment in CDM, which is certainly something I think we support on a bipartisan basis. The MGT Act we just passed into law, and I was proud to be an original Democratic co-sponsor, may help agencies with funding challenges by allowing agencies to establish working capital funds to reinvest IT savings in the enterprise and to transition to cloud computing and other innovative technologies and to enhance cybersecurity. The MGT Act also authorized a centralized technology modernization fund at $250 million for each of fiscal years 2018 and 2019 for a total of $500 million. Once the TMF is funded, agencies can borrow from that fund to finance large IT modernization projects and enhance the CDM process. I was happy to join with Chairman Hurd in a letter to the Appropriations Subcommittee on Financial Services and General Government Subcommittee last week to support appropriating the total $250 million for TMF for fiscal year 2019. Congress and this administration must recognize that unless there's a significant amount of money agencies can use to upgrade old IT systems that are critical for their mission and that can be encrypted, that is to say new investments that can be encrypted, agencies will not only be able to address the low-hanging fruit and will not be incentivized to take on the larger projects that are complicated, take a long time, and could be prone to cyber attack. The shortage of qualified federal employees to work on IT and cybersecurity has also hindered DHS and agency efforts to implement CDM. While agencies are working to attract the talent individuals they need to upgrade their IT systems and defend against malicious cyber intrusions, the administration and some in Congress are taking actions that I think will make it more difficult to recruit and retain the skilled workforce of the future. Disparagement of the workforce, freezing salaries, extending probationary period for new hires from 1 to 2 years, these are not helpful, especially if we're targeting the millennial generation that expects so much more in the workplace. So I would hope we'd keep that in mind too, because that's part and parcel of what we're talking about here. So I certainly welcome this hearing. I think we've put some legislative tools in place that we think can create a structure that will foster CDM at DHS and elsewhere. We certainly look forward to hearing the testimony today about how we can do that better. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. And again, I'll remind other members of the committee that they may submit opening statements for the record as well. Having already introduced our distinguished panel, I now ask the panel to stand. Raise your right hand so I can swear you in to testify. Do each of you swear or affirm the testimony that you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. You all may be seated. The witnesses' full written statements will appear in the record. The chair now recognizes Mr. Everett for 5 minutes for his opening statement.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Hurd, Chairman Ratcliffe, Ranking Members Conley, Ranking Member Richmond, and the rest of the distinguished panel. On behalf of Secretary Perry and Deputy Secretary Brie, I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you today about CDM and modernization and our implementation at the Department of Energy. Chairman Hurd, we talked last November at a hearing, and you asked me a very pointed question. Do I know everything that is on all of our DOE networks? And my blunt answer had to be no. While that is still the case, I am happy to be here today to talk a little more about some of the work and efforts we're making so that I can change that no into a yes. First is the department CIO. I report directly to the Secretary and the Deputy Secretary, which I think is a critical thing for all CIOs in government. I think it's also important because our Secretary and Deputy Secretary have made cybersecurity a priority, not only for our internal networks, but also in our role as a sector-specific agency to the energy sector. And I think that's critical, and our Secretary and Deputy Secretary understand very well the importance of knowing everything that's on our network as a first step to having basic cybersecurity. The Secretary and Deputy Secretary fully support our enterprise plan of action and have directed me to move with all due haste in rolling out CDM capabilities across our networks where we have many gaps, including at our national labs, our sites, and at the power marketing administrations. In both the public sector and private sector, one of our challenges is, frankly, we're moving to a new model. The old model was staff augmentation. The old model was counting contractors. We're moving to a new model, and that new model is around, it's around managed services and automation. That's a significant challenge because most of us in government, and frankly, even many in the Beltway vendor community, have not really caught up yet. And that is an ongoing challenge for us, and I know it very well as a former federal contractor. In the federal workforce, I need people not only with the technical skills to use all these new tools, but I also need people who have customer service ability. I need people who can understand organizational management, people who understand business process. We've got to find, as you spoke about, Congressman Conley, we've got to have a new model to bring in the talent that we need to achieve the goals that we're talking about. I believe that CDM and modernization go hand in hand. Chairman, as you talked about earlier, CDM actually can be a great driver for modernization. The information, the data we get from that can help us in prioritizing what we modernize and putting those priorities out front. And in turn, I believe modernization sets out the platforms that will allow us to do the automation that makes CDM more and more valuable as we go along. It's essential for the incentives for both the CDM federal contract folks as well as the vendors to be aligned to the right goals. I think that's one of our other critical elements here is to make sure that we have incentivized folks to go for our goals. Our goals are not how many tools we have placed in the environment. or necessarily the timelines. Our goals are to provision and provide secure and efficient capabilities to meet our missions. And so we've got to find some ways to make sure that our incentives match that goal. I do want to mention while we're here, I want to thank Kevin Cox, one of my fellow panelists, as well as Mark Nidinger at DHS. I've had multiple opportunities to interact with them and their teams. My team meets regularly with them, and I want to give them kudos because, very frankly, this program's been around for a few years, and really, and especially in the last year, they've done significant work in making the program more collaborative, and I think we need to continue that process of collaboration. One of the challenges, to be very frank with you about CDM, is that many departments have perceived this as a program being done at them and rather than with them. I think Kevin and Mark Nidinger and their team have done a lot to reverse that viewpoint. I want to mention that, again, visibility that CDM brings is only the first step. It's going to require action. We need to focus on making sure that the things we get out of CDM at the federal level and the departmental level are actionable information that we can move forward with. And we've got to do that, and we know that you're going to hold us accountable for doing that. I want to give you a quick example. One of my labs used a CDM-like capability last year to help them find some unmanaged cloud services in their environment, and the steps they took around customer service and mission resulted in provisioning new, better, and more secure capabilities and removing those things which were a management risk out of the environment. We want to find more opportunities to do exactly that kind of thing across the department and across the federal enterprise. Finally, I do want to mention MGT Act. The tools, the Technology Management Fund, as well as the Working Capital Fund are critical tools for all of us in the CIO community. I'm happy to report that I've had a lot of progress talking to our CFO shop, and we put in 5 proposals to OMB for using the Technology Management Fund, and are very hopeful that that will be fully funded very soon by Congress. I want to thank you again for the opportunity to come and talk about this. It's an important issue, and it's a critical tool for us across government, and look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Everett. Chair will now recognize Mr. Blackburn for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman Radcliffe and Hurd, and Congressman Connolly, and members of the subcommittees. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the progress VA is making towards its deployment of the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation Program, as well as our information technology modernization effort. Behind me today are Mr. Dominic Cusat, Chief Information Security Officer, and Mr. Gary Stevens, Deputy CISO, who oversees the VA CDM program. As a proud Army veteran, VA's sacred mission is personal to me. I'm a user of VA services. In January, the Baltimore VA operated on my back. I am currently receiving physical therapy at the Washington VAMC. I have received part of my care through the Veterans Choice Program. I'm a graduate of the Vocational Rehab Program. I use VA's online scheduling tools. I'm one of 5 siblings who has served in uniform. And my father, like Congressman Fitzpatrick, was a career FBI agent. I've left the business world in November 2014 to join VA because I didn't believe VA was delivering on its promise to veterans, and I wanted to do something about it. I'm very proud of the progress VA has made in this time. Since December of 2015, we have increased veteran trust by 22 percentage points, from 47% to 69%. For the past 6 months, I've been honored to lead the ongoing transformation in IT, and it is an exciting time in VA IT. We are replacing VISTA with a modern electronic health record that will achieve interoperability within VA, between VA and DoD, and ultimately with community providers in the private healthcare system. We have not signed the final deal yet with Cerner Corporation, but we hope to be making an announcement soon. 2 weeks ago, we launched a beta version of our Lighthouse Lab, VA's application programming interface, or API management platform that lets developers build apps on a standard set of APIs. Lighthouse, formerly known as Digital Veteran Platform, or DVP, will be the API gateway that connects our disparate systems, allowing information exchange and innovation. Earlier this month, we announced the VA Open API Pledge that 11 major healthcare systems have signed, encouraging healthcare providers to commit to work together with VA to accelerate the mapping of health data to industry standards. We're expanding telehealth and self-service options to include online scheduling to improve the veteran experience. We are supporting priority efforts in the benefits space to include appeals modernization and forever GI Bill. We're pushing aggressively on our buy first strategy to use commercial off-the-shelf solutions to replace expensive and outdated systems. Next week, we'll launch our new cloud-based software as a service IT management tool, which will streamline internal processes and provide a better end-user experience for our employees, allowing them to focus on serving veterans. We are continuing our data center consolidation to be compliant with FITARA. In FY17, we closed 24 data centers, and in FY18, we are in the process of closing 68 more. And of course, underpinning all of this is improving our cybersecurity through our Enterprise Cybersecurity Strategy Program to guard against cyber threats, moving from a reactive posture to a proactive, threat-based computer network defense approach. With cybersecurity in mind, we are committed to protecting veteran information, such as mine, and limiting access to only those with proper authority. I am proud of the accomplishments and how we are securing VA's IT infrastructure. As of December 2017, we've secured 92% of medical devices with vulnerabilities. We've increased PIV enforcement from unprivileged users from 12% in 2016 to 91%. We've achieved 100% enforcement of two-factor authentication for privileged users. We've reduced our unadjudicated software by 94%. We've blocked 7.5 billion malware attempts over the past 2 years, and we monitor more than 45 million emails daily. Through our Enterprise Cybersecurity Strategy Program, ECSP, we manage cybersecurity risks to protect VA information systems. This includes embarking on a change in mindset of how we manage cyber risk. VA's CDM program is a piece of that larger VA information security continuous monitoring strategy covering 15 continuous diagnostic capabilities which are distributed across its 4 phases. We can elaborate further on those phases during the course of the hearing. As part of the CDM effort, we are also documenting and defining existing network hardware, applications, security products, and configuration control settings currently deployed across the agency to further understand the activity across the network. Thank you again for the opportunity to discuss our cybersecurity and IT modernization efforts. Ensuring a safe and secure environment for veteran information and improving their experience is our goal. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Blackburn. Chair now recognizes Mr. Garcia for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Ratcliffe, Chairman Hurd, and distinguished members of the subcommittees for engaging in this important discussion. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you here today. Although I am new to OPM, I am pleased with the transformative activities that my office has already undertaken. Since arriving, I have worked with senior staff to identify key priorities to drive our efforts to build governance processes to support our work. We recognize that OPM is an organization made up of terrific people with the mission to serve not just the federal workforce, but also the American people. To successfully meet this important mission, OPM will continue to bring to the federal government agile, modern IT solutions that reflect its needs and leverage forward-leaning capabilities. The Department of Homeland Security's CDM program is an important element to assist us with this goal. As the former CIO for the state of Maryland and as an executive with over 20 years private sector experience, I look at OPM's current posture through both a private and public sector viewpoint. There are 2 main points that I think are critical to the context of the conversation we're having here today. First, we must understand that CDM is a broad approach and is continuously evolving. Every day, the malicious actors around the globe who are equivalent to military-grade adversaries are adapting. Therefore, as federal agencies, we need to have the flexibility to adapt rapidly. Second, we must strive to have CDM and similar future programs reduce the time required for public sector to procure technological solutions. As an entrepreneur and small business owner, and like our private sector industry partners, I had the flexibility to procure and implement solutions to mitigate zero-day threats and vulnerabilities without delay. However, as a CIO for a federal agency, I do not have that same flexibility. CDM can be tuned to enhance the abilities of agencies to procure the needed cyber defenses as quickly as possible. I feel this will provide agencies the best fighting chance to stay ahead of possible threats. As you may know, OPM is one of the first agencies to fully implement CDM, and OPM completed implementation of Phase 1 with the CDM dashboard fully populated in the spring of 2017. This phase focuses on managing what is on the network, to include management and control of devices, software, security configuration settings, and software vulnerabilities. For OPM, this has meant gaining greater insights into our connection points within our network. In addition, OPM has made use of CDM technologies to identify and strategically resolve potential vulnerabilities, which has resulted in better overall risk management and response. OPM is on track to complete implementation of Phase 2 in the summer of 2018, ahead of the scheduled fall 2018 target. Phase 2 focuses on the management and control of user access privileges. Phase 2 has allowed OPM to standardize the access of systems so that management of all accounts is unified and controlled through an agency governance process. Reducing the volume and scope of user access also helps OPM identify anomalies related to possible insider threat activities and prevent data loss. This is especially critical in the context of the events of 2015 because it will add additional two-factor authentication requirements to address long-standing audit findings. OPM has been successful in the implementation of Phase 1 and Phase 2 due to the alignment of the technology with agency technology strategy and lifecycle management. The use of CDM has set the stage for OPM to move into a continuous monitoring approach that enhances OPM's ability to manage its systems and continually evolve its systems to secure in real time. Looking forward, the future should allow CIOs and CISOs the ability to move as quickly as new technologies and threats evolve. Due to the asymmetric nature of attacks, we need to consider security risks related to the increasing use of artificial intelligence, AI, by our adversaries. For CDM to be successful in the long term, it will need to continue to evolve, including the use of new ideas and concepts such as the use of AI within the federal networks. I accepted the position at OPM because I truly believe in the mission of OPM, because it is an agency in which great success can be achieved and demonstrated. The people of OPM are dedicated. New technology is being implemented, and the agency is committed to supporting all the federal employees who devote their lives to serving the American people. I look forward to working with the members of these subcommittees to continue our efforts of modernization and the evolution of the CDM program so that it will remain a successful resource for federal agencies. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Mr. Cox, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Ratcliffe, Chairman Hurd, distinguished members of the committees, thank you for today's opportunity to discuss the Department of Homeland Security's efforts to secure federal networks. I want to begin my testimony by thanking Congress for its work on the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency Act of 2017. If enacted, this legislation will streamline the organization where I work, the National Protection and Programs Directorate, or NPPD. It will also rename our organization to clearly reflect our mission. The Department strongly supports this effort and appreciates the focus of these committees on seeing it enacted. DHS serves a critical role in safeguarding and securing cyberspace, a core Homeland Security mission. Cyber threats remain one of the most significant strategic risks for the United States, threatening our national security, economic prosperity, and public health and safety. Over the past year, federal network defenders saw the threat landscape they face grow more crowded, active, and dangerous. While in many cases our defenses have been successful in mitigating these threats, we must do more to ensure our cyber defenses keep pace of technological change and evolving risks. Last year, the President signed an executive order on strengthening the cybersecurity of federal networks and critical infrastructure. Cybersecurity is an important component of the administration's IT modernization efforts, and the administration is committed to securing the federal enterprise from cyber-related threats. One of the capabilities NPPD leverages to assist federal agencies with their cybersecurity and NPPD with its mission of protecting the federal enterprise is through a program I manage, the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation Program, CDM. CDM provides cybersecurity tools and integration services to federal agencies. CDM is helping us achieve 3 major advances for federal cybersecurity. First, agencies are gaining continuous visibility into the extent of cybersecurity risks across their entire network. This allows prioritization of cybersecurity actions. Second, with the federal dashboard, NPPD will be able to operationalize this visibility, initially through improved vulnerability management. Prior to CDM, NPPD often tracked government-wide programs in implementing critical patches via agency self-reporting and manual data calls. CDM is changing this model. enabling NPPD to immediately view the prevalence of a given software product or vulnerability across the federal government. All cabinet-level agencies have their agency dashboards in production, with additional assets being added on a daily basis. Additionally, the federal dashboard currently has a quarter of federal assets reporting to it. It is anticipated that the remaining in-scope cabinet-level assets will be reporting by the end of April 2018. Third, through the CDM program, DHS is building important partnerships with other federal agencies, including GSA and industry, to directly address the nation-state and criminal threats against our critical data and federal networks. In the first phase of CDM, NPPD is helping federal agencies better understand what is on their network and better manage the cybersecurity of those assets. IT assets combined with their vulnerabilities and misconfigurations represent a significant attack surface that our adversaries target. Another fundamental principle of CDM is to understand who is on the network. By learning who has access to agency networks, including those individuals with privileged user access, agencies can begin to appropriately restrict network access and ensure the principle of least privilege is being followed. The next phase seeks to understand what is happening on the network. By strengthening network protections and providing expanded visibility to the cloud and mobile devices, agencies will gain a more robust understanding of the events occurring on their networks and help them standardize incident reporting. The program is also beginning to plan for enhanced data protections in federal agency high-value environments, from information rights management to microsegmentation. These Phase 4 initiatives will help agencies secure their most sensitive data, regardless of where it is located on the network. Moving forward, the new CDM Defend acquisition strategy incorporates lessons learned from earlier stages of the CDM program. CDM Defend contracts will support longer periods of performance with higher contract ceilings to provide significant flexibility. In closing, I want to assure these committees that DHS is embracing our statutory responsibility to administer the implementation of federal agency cybersecurity processes, policies, and practices. The overarching goal of federal cybersecurity is to ensure that every agency maintains an adequate level of cybersecurity commensurate with its own risk and with those of the federal enterprise. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I look forward to the questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Chair now recognizes the chairman of the Subcommittee on Information Technology, Mr. Hurd, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Ratcliffe, and I appreciate the manner in which we're able to pursue these important issues and not worry about that silly word, jurisdiction, that I know bothers both of us. Mr. Cox, I think DHS is doing a great job. I think y'all are, this is why, we passed the Cybersecurity Act of 2015. This is why we made y'all the belly button of protecting the .gov domain and coordinating with the private sector. And I have some basic questions. These aren't trick questions, but when it comes to the actual implementation, DHS has the tools that you are helping to implement on some of these other agencies. Is that correct?
Yes, through a series of mechanisms, contracting processes that we've built with GSA.
So does sorry to interrupt,
oh, that's
I'm
okay.
going to try to use my time judiciously. So a agency, do they have to pay you funds?
Yes, sir. It's through the budget that is allocated to DHS that we work with the agencies to fund the efforts to deploy the CDM capabilities.
So Phase 1 implementation of CDM, is it's basically free to those agencies?
The idea is that we fund the foundational year, the base year of the licensing, plus the first maintenance year, and then we transition the maintenance of those tools over to the agencies. And in those first 2 years, we also provide integration support to help with the deployment of those tools.
Gotcha. So basically they're getting this for 2 years, and then they got to figure out how to transition this to the O&M on their budget. Is
That's
that right?
correct. Yes, sir.
To me, this is ridiculous if there's any of the agencies that are not taking advantage of this in trying to implement this. So once it's implemented and you're paying for the licenses, why would Phase 2 cost money to the agency?
It follows, Phase 2 as well as our future phases follow the same model. So we provide base year plus a maintenance year, and then the costs transition off for O&M to the agency. And there's integration support included in that.
So Mr. Garcia, let me transition to you. Since you've implemented phase 1 of this, what is your phase 2 cost?
To be entirely candid, I don't know the entire cost off the top of my head. I apologize.
Like in general, like what are you having to pay? Because you've implemented software, right? And you're just using that software in a different way. So you're using that software and first to understand all the different nodes that you have on that network. And then second, you're trying to figure out basically the access and credentials process and who has access to various things on that network. So it's not like you're having, nobody's implementing any new software. So my question is, if you have people on your team that are managing the CDM tools, what is the cost to going from phase 1 to phase 2?
So when we transitioned, we had other tools in place, and we basically sunset the tools that we had in place and adopted them. So for OPM, it was rather seamless. We were doing the work already coming out of the 2014, 2015 era stuff. So the costs were minimal. I mean, additional about what we were already doing.
And I just want to confirm that point, right? And so my question is for Mr. Blackburn and Mr. Everts, if you have DHS that has the ability to fund phase, the first 2 years of this, and that this is a cost that should be taken over by your existing infrastructure and people, why is there any hesitancy of not accepting or implementing the other elements of those phase 1, or why is phase 2 so difficult? Because the cost is negligible.
Well, the phase 2 are some new tools that people are bringing in. So look, we're a poor example because frankly we're behind. And that's
what I always like about you, Mr. Evie. It's like straight to the point. I appreciate that.
And a choice was made. And again, I don't like to second guess because I wasn't there. I presume that my predecessors acted with the resources and direction they had. We're behind because we focused on a very small part of the department, right? And we're a large and diverse department. So phase 1 and phase 2 are some different tool sets. On a small part of the department, phase 1 is done. We have gone back, and again, at the direction of our secretary and deputy secretary, we're looking to cover all of phase 1 and phase 2 for the entire department. Much like Mr. Garcia, a number of areas in our department, they have CDM capabilities. And what I mean by that, they've got tools that do those capabilities that we talk about in the phases. They may or may not be necessarily the tools that are part of those procurements. And so much like Mr. Garcia, our role right now is we're filling all those gaps, and then my goal over time would be to sunset some of those existing tools as we can, but integrate all the data back into our dashboard, which then goes back up to the DHS. But very frankly, to get to your question, we're starting to look at right now, I think we're working with DHS, we've figured out the cost of filling our gaps, and then we're estimating right now, I think the number I had was a little over $8 million a year for the out-year M&O. Some of that may be absorbed because it will displace existing tools. Some of it is gaps in tools, in which case it is a new cost to us. And so I'm working right now to make sure in our out-year budget, because we do have the time to put it in there, that we pay for that as a department, that it doesn't become all the little ticky-tack stuff, but that we pay for it as a department because it's a departmental tool, much like, again, DHS approaches this as a federal tool for the federal enterprise. That's the direction we're trying to go.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I yield back the time I do not have.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I do see votes have been called. We have one vote. Some of us are going to be going in and out. And thank you all for your testimony. Mr. Garcia, you're new, as you point out, but our committee certainly had the head of OPM at the time of the breach testify before our committee, and she lost her job, frankly, over that incident. Coming in, looking at the situation, this was, I think, the largest federal cyber breach ever, and it compromised somewhere between 24 and 28 million Americans' personal data. How confident are you that we've come a long way and that that kind of breach is unlikely to happen today? Are the vulnerabilities fundamentally still there?
To answer your question directly, I'm very confident.
You are very confident.
I'm very confident we know who and what is on our networks. Am I 100%? I don't think you can ever get to 100% as the landscape, when it changes rapidly. But I'm as confident as I can be in the defenses we've put in place, and a large portion of that, quite honestly, has been hand in glove with the CDM program.
Do you believe that the CDM program had been in place, we would have could have avoided or preempted that cyber attack?
So I thought about that question a lot, and not trying to evade here, but I don't know if I'm fully qualified to say that. I mean, not having been here during that time and understanding some of the complexities that were involved by my predecessors.
One of the problems we had at OPM at the time was systems that couldn't talk to each other, multiple systems, old systems, unencrypted systems. By and large, has that been addressed to your satisfaction as the new CIO?
By and large, I would say yes. Can we get better? Yes. We have 100% PIV authentication for network access. We have micro-segmentation. You can't get onto OPM's networks unless we know you're on and have a valid PIV credential. Again, I think a lot of that work that we've done and what we see from the dashboard is, again, from the tools from CDM.
Yeah. Let me just say to you, I hope part of your mission will be to continue to care for the people who had their data compromised. Because, as you know, that kind of data available, it could be years before someone decides to do something bad and your credit rating is damaged or somebody gets into your financial accounts. And so I do believe we have a sacred obligation to those people ongoing to make sure they're protected, and I know you share that view.
I concur.
I thank you. Mr. Blackburn, welcome again, and thank you for your service, and it's always fascinating to hear your story about you're a customer. We've seen some reports in the press recently that the new electronic system has created more than glitches in some cases, denial of care, mess up of identity, drug protocols, and has actually interfered with the urgent care or specialized care that our veterans need. Could you elaborate on that? I mean, how concerned are you about that? And is this something to be expected that's going to be earned out? Or do we have yet another fundamental flaw in a major investment in terms of veterans or active duty health care?
So I'm very, very concerned, and what you mentioned specifically was with the DoD's rollout of MHS Genesis out in the Pacific Northwest, and I've been working very closely with that team. Stacy Cummings, who leads that team, she and I talk very frequently. We are monitoring that very, very closely to make sure when VA gets ready to launch our pilots after we sign the contract with Cerner, that we won't be making the same mistakes. So there's a number of things that are going well with that, but there's also the things that you mentioned that are not going well, and we're working with them.
All right, I'm going to invite you to submit certainly to our committee, and I assume this committee as well.
Yeah.
Mr. Ratcliffe, I don't mean to presume. Some reports on that, because obviously we're concerned and we've had some history. In the brief period of time I have left, thank you, Mr. Everett, we just had some public reports about Russian cyber attacks on our grid and power system, very alarming in terms of what it could do. And we previously had attacks on the nuclear power system and other systems around the country. Do you believe CDM is a tool that can help prevent that or detect that or preempt it? And how worried should we be about the vulnerability, especially of our grid?
Well, we obviously we take that very seriously. We work with our partners, the FBI and DHS, on ensuring that we work very well with the electric sector on those issues. Obviously, we've had a lot of briefings over even the last week. It is a special concern to me, of course, because we have our power marketing administrations, which for those who are not familiar, Department of Energy, They are directly involved in provision of electricity to millions of Americans throughout the West and Northwest. And that is one of the reasons we are working with them to fill. They have a number of tools. We work very closely with them as part of the department. We're working to make sure anywhere that they do have gaps in these CDM capabilities that are out there, that we're working to fill them. In fact, I just had some of their folks in this morning and meet with them again, depending on snow tomorrow. I will tell you, they have a number of systems in place, and they are, very frankly, a bit of a challenge because they have industrial control systems and SCADA systems, which are a bit unique. And that's one of the areas we want to work with DHS, because you will always have those unique challenges, as broad as the federal enterprise is, that we want to have them. But I absolutely believe that the CDM tools, because they give you the visibility of what's on your network and who is on your network, absolutely will help you in that type of security.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do want to congratulate Mr. Blackburn for making progress in data center consolidation. We want to see more progress at DHS, and we want to see that scorecard, PATARA scorecard, move up. So thank you all so much for being here, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman. I want to advise the witnesses that votes have been called, but we're going to continue the hearing, so I'm going to proceed with questions. I want to let Ms. Jackson Lee know that the hearing will continue if she wants to go vote and return. And actually, I think I will actually take advantage of that myself and see you all shortly. Or you have to go, sir. You have to go. Oh, because you already asked. Okay. Actually, I'm going to continue.